Hello, everyone!
Hello?
And welcome to another episode of Thomas & Friends Character Showcase. Today, we'll be talking about yet another Thomas & Friends All Engines Go character. This is Kana. She's a high-speed engine. And, well, the show isn't really doing much with her, but making her essentially Coco from Chuggington. So let's try and do something actually creative with the character. So without further ado, let's get right into this. According to the All Engines Go Wikipedia page, they suffer so we don't have to, Kana was a freelance design. She seems to resemble high-speed trains you find in Japan, just a lot smaller. She seems to be around Arthur's size. Bigger than Thomas, but not as big as other mainline engines. I like to think that Kana's designer was trying to make an experimental engine. One that is small enough so that she could be mass-produced, but still trying to be at least around the speed of someone like Kenji. However, I think it would be interesting if Kana was, in essence, a failed prototype. Yes, she's faster than any engine on Sodor, but she isn't nearly as fast as what the designer was aiming towards. And perhaps due to how small she is, maybe she doesn't have that great of pulling power. For example, maybe she can only pull up to about 2 express coaches at a time. She's still very fast, faster than Gordon, Spencer, Connor, Caitlin, any of those engines. But what she has in speed, she severely lacks in pulling power. Which, I imagine her being a failure is why she ended up on Sodor. I imagine the designer originally wanted Kana to become the first of a large rank of engines. Ones that would be small enough to go onto branch lines but could still run at mainline speeds. But since she was a failure, the project was scrapped, no investors were interested, and I'd imagine that this creator might take that out on Kana. Instead of seeing the fact that he overestimated her strengths, instead he blames the engine for not trying hard enough, when Kana was probably giving it her all. So, kind of like how Henry was a failed prototype of stolen designs, and once they realized that he was a poor steamer, they tried selling him off as quickly as possible. Maybe Kana's designer pulled some strings to get her sent to the UK. Or, perhaps even more tragically, maybe Kana's builder was going to sell her for scrap, but Kana, maybe she knew Hiro, and he smuggled her to Sodor to save her from scrap, kind of like what Douglas did for Oliver. Now, once Kana's on Sodor, I think she'd be willing to do whatever it takes to stay there. She doesn't want to go back to her builder and end up getting scrapped. But she also needs to prove that she is worthy of staying around. So what she decides to do is begin lying about her own strengths. Like, I'd imagine if she was pitching herself to the Northwestern Railway, she would say things like, hello, Topham. I'm Kana. I was designed to be the fastest engine in the world, being able to pull 5 express coaches at breakneck speeds, topping anything on this island. Which, I like to think the Fat Controller sees right through this. Like, Kana's trying to act like she's the greatest engine in the world, but the Fat Controller can tell she's afraid of scrap. She clearly snuck away. There's no paper saying that she should be here. The Fat Controller has his fair share of stowaways. So, instead of saying this, the Fat Controller just turns to her and says, "Well then, what color would you like to be?" Knowing that if he sends her away, she's probably going to end up getting scrapped. So, the Fat Controller takes her on trial to see if she has what it takes to be a part of the Northwestern Railway. And I imagine the first night she's in the shed, she starts off very friendly, but then she's questioned about what she can do, and once again, she feels like she has to prove herself. because she believes that if she doesn't prove herself impressive, she'll be sent away, she'll be scrapped. So once again, she begins telling these stories about how she allegedly is the greatest engine in the world. Maybe she's even seen some impressive express runs that Kenji did back in Japan. Like, maybe he's like the record holder in Japan. So she takes his stories and just inserts herself. And some of the smaller engines, like Philip or maybe Bill and Ben, they would fall for it. Other engines like Gordon would roll his eyes because he just can't deal with the fact that there's another high-speed engine on the line. But I feel like someone, let's say Edward is in the shed at the moment. He'd be hearing this and he wouldn't be commenting, but he can immediately see through this. He can tell that Kana's just making these stories up. So the next day, Kana rolls up to her train and sees 8 express coaches waiting for her. And she knows she can't pull that. She can only pull like 2 of them at best. So what she decides to do is she pretends to break down. Like, she begins aggressively coughing and spluttering, even though it's clear there's no exhaust coming out of her. Fitter! So Henry takes the train instead, and Kana is looked over at the works, and they can't find anything wrong with her. And she's just thinking, oh, that was a close one. So that night at the shed, everyone's questioning if she's okay, and she just responds with things like, oh, I just must have had a faulty injector. And everyone just, they can immediately tell, yeah, she probably made up those stories. And so the next day, when she's presented the same train, she once again breaks down at the station. At this point, everyone's kind of caught on to the fact that she's just lying about how strong she is. But, however, although engines like Gordon are thinking that she's just a show-off, and maybe even Thomas and some of the other engines are thinking that she's just lazy. They think that she's like D261, where he gives up at the first sign of trouble. But maybe Henry and Edward are legitimately worried about Kana. Not for the fact that she's breaking down. They know that she's making that up. But there has to be a reason why she doesn't want to pull the train. So as she's shunted into the shed, Edward and Henry roll up alongside her and begin to ask her questions. Like, I imagine Edward would start off gently, like saying, Kana, are you okay? And she would respond, oh yeah, I'm just having a bit of system errors. Trust me, if I could pull that train, I would have been out in the time it takes you to blink an eye. And then Henry just stares at her blankly and states, Kana, you're not fooling anyone. Henry! Come on, Edward. Everyone knows she's making it up. And I imagine at this point, Kana's actually starting to tear up, so Henry decides to be a little less direct. So, Kana, why do you fake your illnesses? And despite the fact that she's clearly been found out, she's still trying to keep up this facade. I'm not making it up, but I really am ill. I would be pulling the train. Kana, I know when someone's faking being ill. I spent many years of my life ill in the shed. I know when someone's faking. Which that's when Kana realizes he's not joking. He's actually been through this. So, as a sign of respect, she stops feeling ill, but she still is sniveling a little bit. I'm really sorry. I'm not strong enough to pull the train. Well, if you're not strong enough, I suppose we can take off 1 or 2. No, you don't understand. I can only pull 2 coaches. Which that's when Edward and Henry kind of look at each other and realize, so that's the issue. So Edward tries to be comforting and say, well, Kana, there's several engines on the island that aren't strong enough to pull any express coaches. But as he says that, Duck pulls by with the slip coaches. Cheerio! Even the tank engine's stronger than me! Which Edward tries to comfort her more, but at that point, Henry kind of gives Edward a look to say, I got this. So Henry begins to tell Kana his story about being a failed engine, about how he wasn't strong enough, and how, with a bit of perseverance and help from the controller, he was able to become a really useful engine. So after the talk with Edward and Henry, I imagine Kana would come clean to the Fat Controller and explain how she's somewhat of a failed design and simply can't run mainline services. Now, Kana is expecting the Fat Controller to snap at her, just like what her designer did, but the Fat Controller actually smiles and appreciates that she was honest with him, and he actually has been looking for an engine to run a branch line, the Peel-Godred branch line. Now, for those of you who aren't caught up with your Railway Series lore, the Peel-Godred is a completely electrified branch line on the Northwestern Railway. And considering Kana is an electric engine, I think it would be quite appropriate that she would work there. So, her new assigned job is she'll start at Nafford with 2 of her very own express coaches, just light enough so that she can carry them. And people get into the train and she travels down the line at mainline speeds, since she can manage that with 2 coaches. But instead of traveling down the main line all the way, she turns down the Peel-Godred line and then services that railway. And I imagine at first all the other electric engines would probably look down on her, both physically and metaphorically, because I kind of like to think she'd be one of the smaller engines on the line. But over time, I like to think they would come to see her as this young engine who just wants to be useful. And now that she's working on the Peel-Godred line with her 2 coaches, she finally has a chance to be useful. Now, since she is a young engine and she is a rather fast one at that, I kind of like to think she would like to race whenever the railwaymen aren't looking. Imagine Spencer returns. This is his first time back to Sodor since Kana has arrived. And his first impression is, ugh, you're a ghastly looking engine. And she takes offense to this, but then she begins stating that she's the fastest engine on Sodor, which Spencer scoffs at this and begins laughing. Oh, no Sodor engine could be faster than me. So while their drivers aren't listening, the 2 agree to have a little race, which Spencer is completely confident that he is going to blow her out of the water, but when the race actually begins, which I imagine they're leaving around the same time, Spencer, maybe he left a minute before her, so he's expecting he isn't going to see her until he comes to a stop at a station. But immediately as he's thinking this, Kana rockets by at full speed, and Spencer just left completely agaped. So Kana arrives at the station that they decided was the finish line, and 5 minutes later, Spencer arrives. And she's like, "Oh, I thought you were faster than any Sodor engine." Which Spencer just lets off steam and puffs away. And I imagine her driver would be like, "Well, you shouldn't have done that, but that was really awesome." And yeah, I think I've said my piece on Kana. I think there's a lot of potential that could be done with her, and especially considering the Peel-Godred is a very much untouched area of the island, you can pretty much tell any story you want. And again, you're always free to use these concepts, I recommend. So, this has been Kana. Like she says, she's faster than lightning and faster than a shooting star. Suck it, Gordon. Have a nice day.